Hi everyone, Akiba from Crypto Slate here, and today I have Bryan Hernandez from Structurefy with me. How are you doing, Bryan?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. So, tell us a little about your company.
Sure. So at Structure, we're building a mobile-first trading and investment platform that makes it really easy to trade and invest across a lot of different asset classes. So we're not talking just crypto, we're also talking stocks and ETFs and bonds and the traditional financial assets that you would expect to have at least some allocation in a modern investor's portfolio.
Hmm.
Our goal is to increase financial access to as many people as possible around the world. Historically, it's been rather difficult for many people in emerging markets, particularly, to access quality investment markets, and that's one of the problems that Structure addresses or tries to solve.
Yeah, it's interesting that you speak about developing markets there. In that, actually, one of the things that I've been seeing recently, I've just been in Paris for Blockchain Week, talking about similar issues, is that it's not just developing markets that are having issues now. Sort of Celsius, BlockFi, the SEC in the US are causing quite some issues with people having access to investing sort of DeFi products. Do you serve the US with your products?
No, we currently do not offer the services to U.S. people, although that is an aspiration of ours in the
Hmm.
future. I think we're just going to need to first go to markets where we have a bigger, unique selling point,
Yeah.
where access is currently not as great as it is in the U.S. That's our priority, is to help those
Hmm.
who don't have it, and then work our way to the markets that are pretty well served, which I would consider the U.S. is pretty well served.
Yeah, it's well, so but in the DeFi market, so like Celsius and BlockFi recently had to remove any yield bearing services to anyone that's not an accredited investor. Given your mission within Structure to be able to give people access to tools that they say they wouldn't usually have, or having access to free access, how do you feel about US citizens who aren't accredited investors not being able to access things like yield bearing assets for crypto?
Well, I'm a proponent of more access. More access is typically better, but access isn't without risk. So although I understand the intention of some of these regulations to prevent investors who don't have a lot to lose from getting access to things that might be more risky,
Hmm.
uh, there isn't any like way around it though. These restrictions ultimately prevent people from getting access to sometimes very attractive investment opportunities, and this just kind of perpetuates asset ownership inequality or income inequality, and that's a bad thing. So whenever I talk about regulation, I always try and focus on the intention of regulation, not regulation as an end in and of itself. And what we're looking for with regulation is safety for people. It's not, is regulation helpful or is it harmful? It's just like what are the effects that it will create? And we don't want people getting scammed. We don't want fraudsters being able to run around, but we also want to promote innovation. We want to promote more than anything competition in these markets.
Yeah.
And oftentimes these are at trade-offs to one another. Not necessarily,
Hmm.
but I think one of the bigger mistakes that countries have made to date is to jump too fast into a regulatory regime without fully understanding the consequences that it will have on the marketplace.
Yeah.
And it'll hurt, it'll damage one at least one section of the population
Hmm.
or the market, and you won't really know about it until years later after we see the effects.
Yeah,
So
I was talking to Helen High from Binance. She's the head of NFTs there, and she spoke about the need for regulation to be about communication. She was saying communication is a two-way street, whereas regulation can quite often be a one-way street, and that we need this two-way street, given that how new these products are and how quickly they're evolving. Does that sit well with you?
I completely agree. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, Okay, so I mean, I'm really interested to talk about the obviously the not just the regulatory aspect of it, but sort of the access to financial tools with yourself, because it seems like it's a big part of your mission. So there are a few. I know, say you don't currently serve in the US. You say it was an aspiration. There are a few other questions that I'm interested to speak to anyone, especially if they're not in the US, because I feel like they're a little bit freer to be able to actually talk about the issues, rather than being afraid. Like, say, I tried to speak to Celsius, and there's just no comment. They're not able to. They need to go up the chain like 10 people before there's anyone who's allowed to speak about it. One of the things that I found really interesting, and it actually kind of annoyed me a little bit, was so BlockFi's, but I'm speaking to them in a week or so, so we'll get some more clarity on this. But BlockFi currently have been told that they're not allowed to offer interest yielding products, but they can offer crypto-backed loans. So apparently in the US, people aren't savvy enough to get interest, but they are savvy enough to get loans. Is that something that you see in a lot of places?
That specifically, no, it's a pretty specific thing. I think, yeah, I would caution you as to like forming too many conclusions based on this restriction. A lot of the time, regulatory restrictions are just letter of the law. Technically, you're allowed to do this. Technically, you're not allowed to do that. You are doing both, therefore you have to stop doing one of them.
Yeah, which is what it is, because it's the yield bearing tokens are under the SEC. The SEC's told them they're not allowed to do that. But interestingly, the crypto backed loans aren't regulated, therefore they're allowed to carry on. It's just interesting to say. I'm not going to try and throw you under the bus by saying something that it isn't right, but I do think it's interesting that some of these rules, especially around new emerging tools, as you say, need a bit more communication, I think, so that it's in the right places. Anyway, let's move on. So you tokenized assets. So you talked about sort of the stocks and ETFs involved with this. So how exactly does all of that work?
Sure, sure. So we tokenize traditional financial assets in this very similar way to the way Circle tokenizes US dollars, which is we create a tokenized representation of the asset on a blockchain that the customer is interested in, and then we back it one to one with the physical asset. So if you want to get a Tesla token or an Apple token, we'll mint that for you on Ethereum or Solana or Avalanche, whatever blockchain you want. And then when we're minting it, we're actually going out to the stock market and buying it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have that share, it sits in trust. And this is ultimately the safest mechanism that would make sure that the token is always economically tracking with the underlying asset. And that's the intention of having the token. It's just the token is a much more convenient form for asset ownership, because you can fractionalize it, you can store it in your own wallet, you can send it peer to peer, you can encumber it into some contract that's being developed in the DeFi world. And I ultimately think that will be one of the biggest catalysts towards the growth of DeFi, is unlocking the huge amount of value that's currently stored in traditional financial asset ownership that cannot be accessed in DeFi today, because there's no interface for it. You need to get something in a token form for that to work, and we're trying to help make that bridge.
So you say about tokenized assets. So how does that work? If I want to buy half a Tesla token, you go and buy a whole Tesla share and then hope that someone else also wants half a Tesla token. How does that work?
Yeah, fractionalization. Like if we have a liquidity provider that will sell us a fraction of a share, which we do,
Right. Okay.
then we can only go buy it. But even if we didn't, it's not a big deal, because we would never have to own an inventory for our own account more than one share of every symbol that we offered.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wanted to buy a half a token, and we have to go to the market and buy a whole one, we'll be sitting on that position of the other half. And if someone else wants to come and buy a fraction, if we have enough inventory, we'll sell from that, and it's not a huge amount of exposure.
Yeah, I mean, there's only a handful of shares really that have got any sort of real value per share in terms of, like, say, Amazon, Google. Maybe you on the hook for a few thousand or whatever. But okay, so does this? So how big's the pool of shares and sort of ETFs that are available, and how will this grow?
Oh, it's flexible. So it starts off with zero, and then as a customer comes to the platform, they deposit some crypto like Bitcoin or Ether or something like that, and they say, "Give me 10 shares of Apple." They're paying us in crypto, and we're going and buying the 10 shares of Apple, minting the Apple token and giving it to the customer. So if 100 more people come on and do that same thing, we'll just be going out and buying more of the share.
Oh no, so I mean, in terms of like the different symbols that are available. For instance, I know that under in the UK, I'm not able to purchase any cannabis-based stocks. just because of the way the market works.
Mm.
So yeah, how many different sort of underlying assets do you currently hold, and what's the plan to sort of grow those?
So we're currently in a beta, and we have about 50 different assets trading in the beta. After we come out of beta, there will be in the hundreds.
So you say you have a liquidity provider. Who is it that you work with? Is it like a market maker or?
Sure. We work with multiple liquidity providers across, CeFi and DeFi. We don't disclose that information, at least at this point in time. But our aim is to aggregate liquidity from as many different liquidity pools as possible so that we can give the most competitive prices for asset purchase on the platform.
So in terms of sort of the revenue model, is it a percentage? Is it just a fee in terms of the trades, or is it payment for order flow? How does it work in terms of the business model?
Yeah, so we don't do any payment for order flow. We have the right of selling the asset a little bit more expensive than we went and bought it, so we can take a spread there.
Hmm.
Um, Currently, that's set to zero because we're in a growth phase right now,
Yeah.
and ultimately that's a parameter. One of the interesting things about structures that's a parameter that I think should be set by the DAO, and
Okay.
and it's still a little early in our the life cycle of the company and the project, so
Hmm.
there hasn't been a ton of progress on that to date. But in the long term, I think these are very important economic parameters that should be set by the community of people who are using the product,
Wow.
rather than by fiat, me, as a president, just saying,
Hmm.
10 basis points, that's what we're going to charge everybody. And in fact, we may have earned more money by lowering the fees,
Hmm.
right? So I think the community can help decide that better. In any case, so there's a spread. We also can earn interest on deposits.
Hmm.
So those are two revenue models.
That's really interesting. Say having it run by a DAO, given the last kind of 2 years and issues with how people feel about market makers and hedge funds. I think it's a really interesting point. Where did the idea for the company come from?
Oh, good question. Well, it's been an amalgamation of different experiences across, my career and as well as the one of my co-founder. Ultimately, we saw a lot of people making well, not a lot of people, some people making a lot of money in DeFi and in the growth of crypto, and most other people just sitting on the sidelines. And this was particularly driven by an education gap. Like not like the technology is very new, and not a lot of people have enough time to sit and educate themselves and learn about how things work. And so they're missing out on a huge amount of economic growth. And we thought we could take our trading systems engineering experience, build a product that ordinary people could use, and then hopefully, bring in more people that were currently sitting on the sidelines. So what Robinhood did for stock trading in the US, we want to do for more than just stocks, also crypto and DeFi and everything, but for the rest of the world, which is it invited a whole new generation of investors who, for whatever reason, hadn't had enough time yet to learn about how this world works. And if you present them with a product that is a little bit more approachable and intuitive, then a lot of people will, get their feet wet and start learning about this practice.
On your website, I noticed that the example stocks that you're using are sort of GameStop, Nokia, and BlackBerry. This is three sort of infamous meme stocks. Is that on purpose?
That's a function of when we developed those videos, which is dating like when we designed them.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean meme stocks are just as interesting as non-meme stocks to us,
Oh,
and
growth
ultimately we
stocks. Let's call them that.
growth stocks. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're pretty agnostic as to what assets we list. If there's enough customer interest, we're happy to add it to the platform.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean it makes sense. I mean, yeah, obviously it's where the people want to invest. So, what does DeFi mean to you?
Well, that's a big question. So DeFi means to me that we can accomplish financial objectives, making contracts between two counterparties or a set of counterparties in a via a mechanism that doesn't rely on a centralized institution as much as possible. So the permissionlessness of blockchain and smart contracts, the fact that it's operated on a network that cannot be controlled by one single actor or even a set of many actors. This is a fabric that you can introduce a lot of arbitrary computation onto, and one of the innovations of Bitcoin and Ethereum was that we can start to implement financial functions on this fabric, and that opens up basically the possibility for DeFi. So I think a lot of the financial ecosystem that we're used to before DeFi can be re-implemented on this new fabric in a way that is, ultimately more equitable and can be accessed by more people.
So, in terms of countries, where in the world are you going to be? So, you're in early access or beta at the moment. When you launch, where do you envisage being available?
So it won't be a binary event of like, we're unlaunched and then we're launched. We'll launch in one country at a time across the countries that we think are the most would benefit most from the product. We're going to start in Latin America and work our way outward from there. It'll be available in El Salvador in the summer, and then hopefully quite a long number of countries before the end of the year.
Fantastic. So, in terms of the centralized element that you said that it's trying to use that sort of as little as possible. When I was in Paris, I was talking to the guys from Swissborg, and they were saying that they believe that the future of DeFi is an amalgamation of DeFi and CeFi, and that we're not going to move completely away from centralized finance, but the future is the two merging together, which it sounds like you're kind of moving into that space. Is that how you see the future of sort of finance? Or do you see DeFi taking over at some point?
Well, yeah, I don't see it taking over. I think the North Star and the North for the industry and for us as a company in general is providing a better user experience for human beings, right? That's ultimately what we're trying to do. Sometimes we can do that through centralized means. Sometimes we can do that better through decentralized means. And these two different mechanisms can work synergistically together. We employ both mechanisms at Structure. There are certain applications that are purely decentralized, and I think that that's appropriate. And then there are those that are purely centralized, and I think that can be appropriate in some cases. What DeFi offers is a huge new set of tools to accomplish financial objectives for ordinary people and businesses. And yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but um, you know, it, I mean, in summary, yes. Like it's there's going to be more of everything, I think.
Yeah. No, that sounds great. But it sounds like a really fascinating product. I mean, what was the reasoning for starting in El Salvador? Is it just the crypto friendly focus there?
Yeah, a number of factors. Obviously, the country and the government has been very friendly to using the benefits of crypto to improve financial access. The 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 rate of people owning crypto wallets and using it is very high per capita. It's also historically hasn't been that well served by traditional financial services providers, and so we see there's like a huge opportunity to invite a very large generation of new investors into the market.
Fantastic. Well, I wish you like all the best with the project, and I think anything that tries to empower and enfranchise people that don't have access is fantastic. I see that more in the blockchain space than anywhere else. Again, in Paris, I don't actually think I heard one person talking about how much money their company makes. It's just all about how they can improve the work environment for their team or add something better to the world. Um, why do you think that is? Why do you think people involved with blockchain have so much more of a mission about them than just the financial gain?
Uh, well, I don't think it's true, right? Like I think it's important. I mean, so making the world a better place, doing good, that's internally like motivating, right? It feels good to do this, but one of our missions at Structure is to help people make more money. Making money is a good thing. It's like it's not something to be ashamed of, and a lot of people are looking for more ways of making more money, and our focus has always been on increasing access so that's available to more people. So I think it's foolish to lose sight of that in DeFi because finance is about money.
Mm-hmm.
And if your product isn't helping people do better, then I think the impact is going to be limited. It's not really realistic for most people to not
Mm-hmm.
care about that.
Yeah, I think I was more talking about the fact of there's a lot of focus on doing the right thing and improving sort of humanity, and the byproduct being that people make more money as a result of it, putting that as the focus rather than money as the focus. Um, you think that even with DeFi, if the point of it is to make money, that should be the main focus of what you do?
Um, Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I
Like,
was saying that there's two ways to look at it. Is what you do focused on generating the most revenue for your investors and your shareholders, and if we can do good, and that's great too. Or there's the approach of trying to do good and reach the most people, and that whilst doing that, if you're doing that in the right method, you will still make money, and arguably you may make more by.
oh no, sorry, yeah. To be clear, I was talking about the focus should be on helping your customers make money.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, it's why they care about your
Hmm.
product, right?
And that
Uh,
seems like that aligns with what you're saying the mission of the business is. So yeah, that makes.
yeah, yeah. And I think if we do that successfully, any business does that successfully, they're going to have a great business
Hmm.
and they'll do well for themselves.
So just to wrap this up, so the is Structure itself a DAO, or is there a DAO alongside that's going to be taken over at some point? How does that work?
Currently, it's not a DAO. We have plans to move it over to be a DAO
Hmm.
as we get more stability in the product
Yeah.
and release things. Like everything has to kind of happen in stages, and it's much easier to grow a new business like
Hmm.
from the traditional model first. But everything about Structure is with the view of being interoperable with DeFi later.
Hmm.
So this is why we're tokenizing stocks. Is ultimately we think this is going to be a very important interface for financial assets,
Hmm.
uh, and including utilizing DAO-like governance structures in order to make decisions for the tool itself and also the ecosystem that surrounds it.
Fantastic. So I will let you go in a minute ago. I'm just kind of really interested in just wanting a few little things. So where are you actually minting these the tokens for the tokenized assets? Is it on Ethereum? Is it on Polygon? How are you doing that?
Yeah, it's chain agnostic, so the customer can select the chain that they want it to be minted on.
Oh wow,
We'll start with the easy ones, Ethereum, Polygon, Solana, these, and then work our way out to the longer list of other smart chains.
that's really cool. So if I go and say I want a Tesla share, and I want one on the Binance Smart Chain, I want one on Polygon, and I want one on Avalanche, like eventually that will be what you're able to do.
Yeah, I mean, every new change that we support requires a bit more
Yeah,
engineering
that's
work,
good.
but that ultimately is the goal, is to let people put their assets on the chain that they want to have them on.
And then would they be able to be swapped within the app as well? Say you decided, okay, I no longer want this on Binance. I want this to be in Ethereum. Is it?
Yeah, yeah. So you would just, deposit it back to the platform and then withdraw it onto a different blockchain.
And if I, so if I buy a Tesla token and I have Bitcoin, I can swap the two between each other, and then I can use the Bitcoin to buy something else. So, and I can buy Bitcoin from you. It's all just swapping and trading in app.
Yeah, all of the assets are money, right? So what you're paying and what you're receiving is arbitrary. Like any of the assets on the platform can be used to pay or you can receive.
Fantastic. Sounds really cool. So, when could we expect it in Europe? That's where I am. So,
Yeah, good question. Some countries in Europe will be earlier than others. I would say,
I'm in the UK. So,
check back towards the end of the year, and
mhm.
we should have at least a handful of countries in Europe that we can open to.
Fantastic. Right, brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Brian. Thanks for being here today, and best of luck with Structure.
No, thanks a lot. It's been great.